I have the pleasure of introducing my mate Chuck Schwartz. And Chuck's been in this club about 1.5 years. He first came here because I think he was forced to come because of a class. But after coming here, he just couldn't help himself to come to these secret meetings at 7 o'clock in the morning. And we all know Chuck. He's a man of great wits. Sometimes we don't know what the heck he's talking about. But he's got the ability to take words and bend them around and to get us thinking and laughing. Let's introduce Chuck Schwartz. Hey, Chuck!
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Chuck.
Well, the world was formed about 4.5 billion years ago, and there's been life on it for about 3 billion years. And the first organisms, they would use chemical reactions to get by. You know, if you oxidize a metal or another element, you can steal an electron, power synthesis, or whatever. And a small eon later, pigments were developed that could harness the energy of the sun, which was a lot more plentiful. The two most important pigments being chlorophyll and bacteriorhodopsin, which is the precursor to all the visual pigments in animals. And what they did is they could take carbon dioxide and water, and they could make a 6-carbon sugar and 6 molecules of oxygen. Now these cells were called prokaryotes because there was no compartmentalization. Everything was floating around freely inside. But it was still a great moment in evolution. They had everything they needed to live. There was a membrane to separate themselves from the outside, genetic material to reproduce, so it's somewhat consistent. They even had a microtubular system, so they could shunt things around in the cell and even move the cell around with an appendage called a flagellum, which is like a little whip. You know, they could spin it around behind them and swim, or if they had more than one, climb in between soil particles. So the world, as a matter of fact, all the flagella and cilia, which are smaller versions of the same thing, have the same basic structure. And the center has a pair of microtubules surrounded by 9 pairs of microtubules around the outside. And one of the proteins involved in this is called actin. And we all remember from high school biology that our muscles work with the proteins actin and myosin. So the world was theirs. And about 1 billion years later, membranes got to be a lot more prevalent. Genetic material got enveloped in a structure called a nucleus. And digestive enzymes got segregated in little packs called lysosomes. So they're not trying to digest the inside of the cell while other things are going on. And there were 2 other structures that occurred or started to arise, the chloroplast and the mitochondria. These were considered to have been free-living bacteria at one point that got engulfed by another organism and not digested. And we think that because they have their own DNA, they're not under the control of the nucleus. Now, when the cell creates energy this way, it puts the energy into what are called high-energy bonds on special molecules, so it can be used as a currency and spent wherever in the cell that the energy is needed. So the payoff for fermenting a 6-carbon sugar is 2 ATPs. That's the name of the molecule. But after 1 billion years of photosynthesis, with oxygen being a major byproduct, the mitochondrion could finish the metabolizing of the sugar in a process called respiration. And the end products of respiration are carbon dioxide and water. And the payoff of respiring a 6-carbon sugar is 30 ATPs. This is a great moment in evolution. Cells can get bigger. They can reproduce much more quickly. The world was theirs. And it was another 1 billion years when, instead of having these large aggregations of cells that are all the same, there were organisms that had multi-cells. And there was division of labor, and then later on, specialization. So you figure it took about 1.5 billion years for life to arise, and then 2 billion years to reach the point of multicellularity. In the last 1 billion years, we've had every plant, every fungus, and every animal that has ever existed arise. I wonder what the next great moment in evolution is going to be.
Thank you, Chuck. Let's hear it for Chuck.